Well, thanks for being here. My name is Mark Samples. I teach music history. I am a trained musicologist, and we're coming to the end of my third year here, so I will be going for reappointment in the fall. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to talk to you for a couple minutes about my experience so far, and then I will yield the floor to much more experience. But the idea is I'm going to give you some of my best practices. Some of these things are principles that you will hear again and again through all three. Others are just the way that I have solved some of these issues, take or leave them. But as I'm a writer, I'm a music historian, so I write for a living, like many of you in the room. And as they say, you can fix a bad page, you can't fix a blank page. So the idea is give you a couple possibilities, and then you can go out and fix them for yourself. So first thing is this. So starting with basics, you all have a handout, yes? Okay. So the first thing I think is very useful to keep in mind is that you are responsible. You are responsible for your file. We start from that position that I take full responsibility for making my own file complete. I take responsibility for finding the information. I take responsibility for making the file a good representation of my work. Starting from that position, I think is very useful because then I feel empowered to ask questions. I feel empowered to go find the information on my own, and when I can't, I can ask people who might know, right? And when there are sometimes multiple answers to the same question, different answers, it's my responsibility to figure out what's the right way to do that. And that starts with understanding the documents, right? So instead of asking what the documents say, of course you need to go find them, copy them, paste them, and include them in your document. And I have been very fortunate to have a lot of great help ever since I've been here. I've had a wonderful faculty mentor who is here, sitting right there, Jeff Snedeker. He's answered lots of questions for me. But also not just Jeff, but others in my department have been very open and helping when I have questions about my file, to the point where they stand over my shoulder looking at these things and saying, no, that doesn't go there. That goes there. And having that experience, and especially for those of us who are earlier in this process, maybe the Faculty 180 side of it is not as difficult because we don't have to convert anything. What's difficult for us is understanding the history and understanding where this stuff goes and how to put forth the best file. So the next thing that I'll say is every entry must have supporting documents. I think you might hear that a couple times. You've probably heard this before. I don't have all that much to add here, except that there's a metaphor that I found helpful. So I have to explain to my students what a check is, right? Those things that people write on, and that gives you the right to go take it to the bank and then get money for that check, right? The paper check. So, but we all know what a check is. So I find this very helpful. So have you ever gotten a check in a card for your birthday or for Christmas or for a holiday or for something like that, and the check sits on the counter for some number of days? When I was in college, I don't know why, but sometimes I just left those checks there. I was broke, but I still didn't cash that check. So what I came to realize is those checks have potential value, right? Those checks are potentially valuable to me. But unless I actually take it to the bank and cash it, I can't buy ramen with it, right? I can't buy a cup of noodles with it. So it's the same thing with our scholarship, right? Our work, our teaching, our activities. And what's the cashing of the check? We do all things all the time, and we have lots of potential value there, but we actually have to get the documentation. We have to put it in Faculty 180, and it's at that point that we've cashed the check, right? And so I found that helpful to think, oh, do I have to put it in Faculty 180? It's the same thing. Do I have to take my check to the bank if I want my cup of noodles? Yes. Yes, I do. So that's how I think about that element. One of the things that I found frustrating are the date ranges. Anyone struggle with those date ranges on Faculty 180? You have to put in the starting date range, you have to put in the ending date range, and if it's something that's ongoing, it's something that's ongoing. But the importance of this is that determines whether or not it shows up in the review on the other side. And if you don't if you don't manage those date ranges correctly, your evaluator may not see it at all. And here's the issue. When there were binders, you knew that it was in there, right? But when there are not binders and there's not a tactile way to review your file, sometimes you don't realize that things are not in there. So the solution here is, if you go into the, I think it's Vitas and Biosketches. Have you all been there? You've all seen Vitas and Biosketches? Pull the report for whatever reappointment or tenure review or tenure and promotion. Pull that report and let it auto-run is what I would suggest. It will auto-populate those dates and it will spit out a list, right? Print that out. I like to go through it by hand to make sure that everything that should be on that grouping is actually there. And oftentimes I'll catch one or two things that I thought were there, but it's just the dates were off. Okay? So that's one thing that I found helpful. It's a check. So for documentation, I'm sure you all have wonderful ways to keep documentation, right? One of the ways that I like to do it is I like to have it uploaded for me. So some of these things are automatically uploaded for me, like the SEOIs and so forth. Some are manually uploaded. I would recommend always uploading PDF versions, because PDF versions will go, it's like printing in a digital format, and then that gets uploaded the way that you want it to look. If you're uploading a Word document or some other type of document, it won't necessarily look the right way on the other end, right? And then use the magic phone. Oh, thank you. As you're scrolling, use your magic phone. These are, if you have one of these magic phones, the scanning apps on these things have gotten incredibly easy to use. There's now one built into Dropbox. So it goes straight to your Dropbox account into a dedicated file that you might be able to use there. And I will show you at the end of my time here, I will show you my filing system in case that will be of use to you. I found it to be quite helpful. Okay, so scholarship, letters of acceptance, the conference programs, the excerpts of the papers, your slideshows, etc. Service, we get letters at the end of our service, at the end of the year. Just as soon as they come in, I scan them, I put them in the file, it's ready to go. And for evaluation, all previous evaluation letters. So when you're proofing your file, the goal here, of course, as we all know, is complete coherence. You've all been on the other side of these evaluating processes, right? Maybe not as a promotion and tenure evaluator, but you've evaluated awards, you've evaluated acceptance, like admission letters and so forth. And what's the biggest red flag? If this doesn't align with that, which doesn't align with that, you think, oh, there's something fishy here, right? Who's felt that, right? On an application, you're like, oh, this doesn't look right. Okay, so don't do that to yourself. Just make sure, look at the whole thing in one fell swoop and make sure that everything aligns. So the next suggestion is that Vitas and Biosketches trick. And here's something that's just a suggestion here at the end. Do unto others. So do unto others as you would have them do unto you. If you really wish that other people would send you that email after you guest lectured in their class and said, hey, thanks so much for guest lecturing in my class. My students are still talking about it and they were really affected by your teaching style. You be the first one to do that to others, okay? I mean, it takes what, 45 seconds to 2 minutes to send something like that? But as we've seen, that's a big deal for files like this. So I would encourage you to set up a practice to support your colleagues in that way, insofar as you are able. Okay, when I was originally asked to do this, I was asked to talk a little bit about the personal statement letter. And the biggest problem that I have to overcome, and I think others have to overcome with the personal statement letter, is what I call the curse of knowledge. This is a concept that I get from Chip and Dan Heath from a book called Made to Stick. And the idea here is that we can't remember what it was like to not know what we know so well, namely our files and our activities, right? Or think about your own discipline. Can you remember? I actually can remember what it was like to not know what a musicologist was. But that's where most of my students are sitting, right? So I have to go all the way back to that point to describe what a musicologist is. And you have to go back and make sure you give enough context to your activities when you're actually writing your personal statement letter. So how do you avoid this? Well, I got several great tips right from the beginning. Excerpt, state the expectations. State what you are expected to do at the department, college, and university level in your letter, right? Excerpt it, and then show exactly how you meet each of those things. How many of you are already doing this? You excerpt fewer than I thought. So just go to the documents, swipe your portion, put it up there, and you say, I am going to be evaluated by the following criteria. And then you go through in your letter and you just address all of those criteria. Again, alignment, right? Make it so easy, it's obvious. In my department, there are performers, right? There are composers, there are educators and ensemble directors, and there's me. I am an academic. I'm the only one who is solely, is that right? One of the only ones who is solely academic. As far as evaluation, right? Education is also like that. So I have to state for the department level and then for the college level exactly how I should be evaluated. Okay? And then give that context. Give that context enough so that anyone along the whole chain can actually understand what it is you are doing. Okay, climb up and down the ladder of abstraction. This is another writing technique that I love. It's a metaphor. This one comes from Roy Peter Clark, who wrote a great book called 50 Writing Tools or something like that. So what's the ladder of abstraction? If you're in the clouds, talking about democracy, freedom, these are all abstract concepts. But then, voting, the ballot box is something that's very concrete. So the idea as a writer is to climb the ladder between abstract concepts like high-level scholarship, and then climb all the way down the ladder of abstraction to saying, scholarship A article in XYZ journal. The secret is don't hang out in the middle of the ladder. Right? Have you ever been on a tall ladder? And the middle is where it's the most dangerous, right? Like right in the middle of that ladder. That's where you're going to fall off. But if you hit the abstract and then the very concrete, it answers both questions in the reader's mind. One of my mentors, her favorite phrase was, no purple prose. You'll know what purple prose is? Is that a phrase you're familiar with? It's that flowery language that your students use to sound more important. So just state it clearly, succinctly, and concretely. Okay, tips and tools, and then I am going to wrap up here. I know we all hear this all the time, but if you do a little bit at a time, frequently, you will ease a huge burden. And so what I've done is I have a weekly calendar appointment with myself, Fridays at 3, that says Faculty 180 session. Okay? I don't always keep it, but it's always on my mind. And so if I miss a couple weeks, I just start over. Okay? And this way, when it comes to going through the whole file, it makes it so much easier. It makes it so much easier. Second thing is if you set up a single location to store all files. So I don't know about you, but some things come in at work, some things come in when I'm traveling, some things come in paper mail, some things come in various ways. And so what I found is the addition of one element, which is an inbox, where anytime something comes in, I just stuff it in the inbox and then file it later. Right? This is both a physical and a digital version, which I'll show you in just a moment. That's hugely helpful in getting this stuff processed, so that when I have that Friday appointment, I can just sit down and process the stuff and be done with it. That makes it sound very easy. It's not easy. And I don't always do it right, but it's helpful to have that there. And here's what I want to do. I want to show you a bit, if you would indulge me, of this filing system. Now this is, of course, a bit specific to a Mac, but you can easily adjust this for yourself. So what I've done here is in this, so I have tenure file docs as a hot link on my sidebar, right? Then basically what I've done is I have mapped on Faculty 180 into a filing system. So if you look on Faculty 180, it starts with what? Profile, right? And then you have workload plans, teaching, scholarship, service, optional, and faculty evaluation, right? And then I added this one with a little exclamation point, which means it's always at the top, right? And so that's my inbox. Anytime something comes in, I know that on Friday, or whenever I sit down to do this, these are the things that need to be processed and placed into either my files or into Faculty 180. And then I have all the documents here, okay? I have the excerpts of the CBA that are relevant to me to evaluation. I have the guidelines and I have everything there. And then, for instance, teaching, I have the SEOIs, courses taught, other instructional activities. Scholarship, I have AB and other activities. So basically by fold, if I'm missing anything, I know where it is, right? Any documentation, I know exactly where it is, okay? And so then service, of course. You'll notice this is mapped exactly to Faculty 180. Optional, those are all there. Faculty evaluation. And then global is for anything that maybe applies across. It doesn't fit into a category. So I'll tell you, this took me maybe 30 minutes to set up. And it has saved me I don't know how many minutes. And here's the big thing that I found from this. If there's already a location, I'm more inclined to put it there now. As it comes in, I'm more inclined to just shuffle it over there, then I don't have to worry about it. So spending this 30 minutes has changed, I would say, almost everything for me. And when I don't know exactly where it goes, I put it in the inbox, and then I can process all of those inbox things as a batch later. So that's just one practice that I've used. Now what I want to do is I want to hand it over to the next speaker to deepen this, this knowledge. Thank you so much for humoring me, and I think we'll probably have time for questions toward the end. But thanks so much.
All right, so here we go. My name is Matt Altman. I just went through PTR last year and promotion. So I gave you the handouts, or you have the handout that I distributed. 2 sheets, 2 sides to each sheet. I'm going to bring it into 3 basic ideas. First, get clear about what the expectations are. Second, satisfy the expectations. And third, document that you've satisfied the expectations. Right? So first point, get clear about what the expectations are. That means review the department and college personnel documents. If those documents are vague or ambiguous, you need to straighten them out. Either fix the documents at the department level, or talk to the dean, the chair, department personnel committee about what they mean by what they say in those documents. All right? We're getting a lot of cases now, not really in CA, but where some documents say, here are some ways you can document that you've completed this activity. And then they list 2 or 3 and then say, et cetera. And then a faculty member puts in something and they say, well, that's good enough, that's in the et cetera. Well, you know, if you're not telling them exactly what they need to do to satisfy the requirement, then they may not give you exactly what you want to indicate that they've satisfied the requirement. All right? How many category A's do you require? How many category B's? What counts as a category A and a category B? All right? You'd be surprised the stuff that's going through where no one can decide and people disagree about it. This is something that, yes, the faculty member has to read the stuff and get clear about it and ask questions. But one of the themes of what I'm going to talk about is that chairs and department personnel committees have a big responsibility in this process. And sometimes chairs and department personnel committees are not fulfilling this responsibility as well as they should. So I'm talking, Mark's not going to say this, but since I'm more of an old-timer here, I can say that the people who have been around the block and are the ones on the department personnel committee and the chairs need to step up and help, especially junior faculty members, to go through this process. All right? There are department documents that are unclear about what's expected and what doesn't count and what does count. If you, at the department level, think that something counts and it counts according to your document, then you need to be willing to go to bat with the dean, the provost, the college personnel committee, whatever, that is something that counts according to your document. But it doesn't work if your department document isn't clear, all right? So I think hopefully one of the things you'll do right out of here is go back and review what your department document says and see if it's clear, because if it's not clear, there are going to be all sorts of disagreements, okay, down the line. Right? So individual faculty members should review that stuff, but departments need to clearly spell out what's expected of faculty, and that's not always the case. Okay? I mean, colleges too. The college document in CA is pretty good, all right? So that's not such a big issue with us, but that's an issue in some other colleges, all right? But department documents are pretty unclear. The faculty member then has to get clear about that stuff, and if the expectations aren't clear, they need to ask questions, okay? Now this one, satisfying expectations, is something that only the faculty member can do. So this is the one that relies entirely, or depends entirely on what the faculty member does, all right? You gotta actually accomplish what the requirements say you need to accomplish. Now that might sound easy with category A and B stuff, although if you have something that you want to count as category A, you better talk to people. If it's not clear from the documents, you need to talk to people and make sure it's going to be counted as category A. Don't just assume going in that it is if there's some question about it, all right? But there are other things, like there are a lot of college and department personnel documents that require peer reviews, a certain number of peer reviews over the review period. And a lot of times people forget, all right? You really need to accomplish all the things it says you need to accomplish and get your ducks in a row, all right? For example, getting peer reviews of your classes, and there's an easy way to handle this. Everybody has to be reviewed at some point, so talk to somebody else in your department or outside, it doesn't matter, and do an exchange where they come and sit in on your class and do a peer review, and you sit in on their class and do a peer review. I did that with a couple of different faculty members in CA and outside of the college, and it worked really well because you get to learn from each other and you both need it, so why not do it, right? So you want to make sure that you're satisfying the expectations, and especially stuff like that gets pushed off to the side. If you're on a 5-year, if you're up for your post-tenure review, a lot of times you sort of think, well, did I get a peer review? I don't know, 4 years ago, maybe. And then you look, and then, oh yeah, that was 10 years ago, right? So you want to be sure to get that stuff down, all right, before you go through this process. Right? The last thing is to document that you've satisfied expectations. Now again, this isn't only on the faculty member, all right? Yes, I know the CBA says it's up to the faculty member to get the dossier complete, and that's true, okay? Ultimately, it's their responsibility. However, as has been stated earlier, Todd brought this up earlier, once it gets to the college level, all right, the level of the college personnel committee, it's closed. At the department level, the department can help the faculty member to make sure the dossier is complete, all right? I saw a case this year where a chair just wrote in his or her letter, I'll say his or her, wrote in his or her letter that there's documentation missing. That should never happen in a chair's letter. What they should do is say to the faculty member, hey, you're missing this stuff, okay? Then the chair can request from Charlene Andrews to have the file unlocked. The person puts in the documentation, it gets submitted again, everyone's happy, all right? If you're a chair or a department personnel committee, your faculty member should not be dinged on whether they include documentation, because you should work with them to make sure that it's there, right? This is not just their responsibility, it's also your responsibility to review it. So one of the things I say in there is once the file is sent forward, the dossier is sent forward, first thing that should happen is the chair and the chair of the chair and the chair of the department personnel committee should sit down and review the person's file to see if anything's missing. right? Oh, you didn't include your personal statement, right? Don't write a letter that says there's no personal statement, then send it up the food chain. It doesn't work that way. Help your faculty member to get it complete. Say you're missing this, get it in there, okay? You don't want your faculty member to be punished for forgetting to do something or having inadequate documentation. You want them to be judged based on what they've accomplished, all right? You don't want them to be judged based on what they document, and certainly you don't want to basically let them have a pass, right? It doesn't do them any favors if you say, oh, that's good enough for us, and then send it up to the college personnel committee and the dean. Because at that level, they're going to say it's not good enough for us. Then who are you benefiting? Not your faculty member, okay? Now the faculty member obviously has to make sure that everything is properly documented and get everything in there. But since, you know, Mark's not tenured yet, I can say to you tenured folks who are chairs and on the department personnel committee, it's kind of on you too, all right? Help your faculty member to get their dossier complete, all right? Now I'll talk to the faculty. I'm trying to think of a non-vulgar way to say this. Don't do an inadequate job of completing your dossier, right? Over-document things. So, for example, if you've published a lot, that's wonderful, all right? And you submit all the publications, you have all the PDFs in there and the conference programs and all that stuff, that's great. If you know someone in the field who can say, yeah, this person's really amazing, have them write a letter. I mean, people do this all the time for one another. It certainly doesn't hurt, you know, if you're sitting back and thinking, well, that's unnecessary, who cares? You know, it can only help you to have someone say, yeah, this person's amazing. They're doing this great research. Same thing goes for committee work, right? If you were on a committee, have the chair of the committee write a couple of paragraphs on what you've done on the committee, the fact that you've attended, all right, and what the committee's accomplished. These are all very important for higher levels of review to understand that you've been active in service and what you've accomplished in your service, right? And again, we do this sort of thing for each other all the time. It's expected. If you ask a committee chair to do this, they're not going to be upset about it because at some point someone's going to have to do that for them, right? So documentation, you should, well, you'll see like peer reviews, they're not exactly sure where those should be, all right? So there is a spot for peer reviews under individual classes, all right? But then I've been told by people at higher levels that, well, it's hard to find those, you gotta kind of dig down and find them. So they say, well, put them under the personal statement. You know what I do? I do both, right? Put it under the personal statement, put it under the class itself. What are they gonna do? Complain that it's redundant? So what? I wasn't sure you would be able to find it, so there you go, right? So I guess the theme is overdo it, right? You can overdo it in where you put the stuff like the peer reviews, but also letters. You know, if you think, yeah, I was on that committee, everyone knows I was on that committee. Not everyone knows you were on that committee. Not everyone knows that you attended, right? Believe it or not, there are people who have committee work, you know, in Faculty 180, and they've never attended a committee meeting. You want to let the higher levels of review know that you've been active and you've been contributing to this, right? So document all that stuff. So the faculty member's responsibility is to make sure it's documented, but the Department Personnel Committee and the chair should make sure that the stuff is there that should be there, right? Unless the faculty member is being obstinate, they probably just aren't aware of what's supposed to be there. So you need to help them. This is part of mentoring younger faculty or mentoring people your own age, whatever, right? Some people may not know about hot linking and all that stuff, but just help them out, right? Just tell them where the stuff needs to go. And if it's not there, again, don't punish them at the department level. Help them to get to the point where they're the strongest candidate they can be, given how much they've satisfied those expectations. I mean, you can't give the person a Category A publication if they don't have one. granted. But if they have a Category A publication and the documentation is not good enough, you shouldn't let that get to the college level, right? You should make sure the documentation is appropriate, because it doesn't help them to send it up the chain if there's no appropriate documentation, okay? So that's, and what I have there, and one of the ways you can be transparent and have clear expectations is to have a checklist. This is just a suggestion. In my department, so this is the second sheet there. In my department, we have as part of our department criteria this appendix that just tries to take people step by step. Here's what we want, and here's where we want it. Check, check, check. Some of you may remember this sort of thing with the binders, right? It's something like that. We're trying to basically follow something like that so people know exactly what to include. Now, of course, there's still questions. We can't nail everything down, but we're trying to give faculty as much guidance as we can. You don't have to do this. You don't have to use something like this, and certainly if you did use something like this, it would be tailored to your department. But I think my department's finding this very useful. If anybody wants to steal it and adjust it to your own uses and tailored to your own discipline, that's fine with me. You know, I have no pride of ownership. In fact, I didn't even do much of it. Dr. Coe did a lot of it. But anyway, I really, that's one way then that you can clarify what the expectations are and help them to document what they've done. Okay? So those are three kind of general themes. As I say, a lot of it's on the faculty member. And obviously the faculty member is the one who's either going to benefit or not benefit from how well they do. So it's going to be on them. But ultimately, I think there is responsibility here that has to be met by the Department Personnel Committee and the chair. Okay, so I'm talking both to people who are going to be up for review and department chairs and department personnel committees. There are ways that you can help give your faculty member the best chance of succeeding by getting involved here and here. Okay, so that's kind of a general picture of how I think it should go. I have specific suggestions in the document. So I think we'll talk later about other specific questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks. I'm Margie Morgan. I've actually never been through the evaluation process. But at this point, I've done 13 years worth of evaluations as dean, as department chair, as department personnel committee member, and as a member of the college personnel committee. So I think I could probably have a Category A publication by this point of evaluation letters. So I'm speaking from that perspective, sort of a global thing. And much of what I have here, people have already talked about. I'll try to focus more on the things that maybe people haven't. I divided my comments into three parts: general tips for everybody, tips for chairs and college department personnel committees, and tips for faculty who are going up for review. So we'll start with the general tips. I think first couple things have been talked about. Update Faculty 180 at least quarterly. That way, I mean, people talk about the hours that they spend doing their Faculty 180 file before their review, but if you're updating everything quarterly, I don't think this should take that much time. We've mentioned the documents. I'm not sure people mentioned Article 22 of the CBA. If I were a faculty member going up for review, a department personnel committee member or a chair, new chair, the first thing I would do is I would read Article 22 of the CBA if I had to do a faculty evaluation and as a faculty member going up for review. This is where the process is defined. This is the most general description of the evaluation process. Everything underneath that at the college and department level stems from that CBA. So start with Article 22, then the college, and then your department criteria. And then when you write your statements and your letters as chairs and department personnel committees, write these things in the context of the standards. We are not being evaluated in a vacuum. I can't tell you how many letters I've seen over the past 13 years that do not mention the standards at all. They say somebody's stellar. Well, somebody is stellar not in a vacuum here. Somebody is stellar because they've really exceeded the standards, and you need to say that, and you need to show that in your statement, in your letters. I can tell you now that I've been on the college personnel committee, I mean, when I was dean, I knew everybody in the college. I knew everybody's work. But I can tell you from being on the college personnel committee that people are evaluating you who don't know you. Not only do they not know your work, they don't know you. Don't know who you are. If you walked in the room in the midst of the evaluation, they wouldn't know who you are. So that means that, I think it's been said here before, you need to really explain things and recognize that you're not just providing these materials for the colleagues in your department who know you well and know your work. You're also providing your materials for people who don't know you at all. And the same goes for your discipline. Again, that's been said. There are going to be a lot of people outside your discipline who have no idea what the acronyms are in your discipline. They have no idea what the significance of the venues are or the presses are. And so that kind of disciplinary context has to be made clear. And I think everybody has a responsibility. The faculty member, the chair, and the department personnel committee. When I was the chair, I thought that that was my responsibility, even more than my faculty, to provide the disciplinary context, the significance of the work that was being done. So those are some general comments for everybody. Now some comments for chairs and department personnel committees. The first one, mentor faculty long before you see the materials in Faculty 180. This relates to some things people have already said, but it is my sense that some faculty members are finding out that something they thought was Category A is not, and they're finding that out from the letters that are written in Faculty 180. So we don't want this to happen. It's important to read the standards, but no matter how clear standards are, people will interpret them differently. You know, I'm an historian, that's why we have a job, because everybody interprets the same documents in such a different way. So we can write and rewrite our standards every year for the next 100 years, and not everybody's going to agree on things and see them, interpret them the same way. So this is hugely important to recognize. Even if you think you understand your standards and you think they're clear, I think it's extremely important, especially with tenure track faculty, that you talk fairly regularly with your senior colleagues, with your chair, maybe some department personnel committee members, and be sure that you all are on the same page about how the work you're doing is perceived, what category it is in, right? So that you know and that you're not surprised. I can't tell you how many cases we've seen where the faculty member characterizes the work one way, the chair another way, and the department personnel committee another way. And we're left at the college level to figure all of this out. Now, I'm not saying that everybody has to agree. Sometimes, I mean, I disagreed a lot, you know, and still do with characterization of things. But if you disagree, say so. Why? You know, but the most important thing is, what you really want is for things to be consistent as much as possible, and that means mentoring your faculty along the way and being sure that they're not working for 2 years on something that they think is Category A and you're going to think it's not, right? Again, yes, I think that this happens. We're all busy. The Faculty 180 files come. I'm guilty of this myself, and it's 2 weeks before I look at them. I want to suggest, I'm going to be the chair of our History Department Personnel Committee next year, and I am going to hold myself to this. When the files come, I'm going to look at them immediately. Because just like Matt said, it is my responsibility, and it is the chair's responsibility, in addition to the faculty member, You are representing your department with these files. Everybody needs to work together to be sure they are complete. And in fact, those of you who've been here for a while will remember, we used to have a cover sheet, a checklist. It was not just the faculty member that had to sign it. It was the chair and the department personnel committee who had to sign that sheet, saying that they had reviewed the file, they checked off everything, and were sure that everything was there. So it's a collective effort to be sure. And because the faculty member now doesn't know what you're going to see on the other side, on the binder, we knew. We submitted a binder and we knew what everybody was going to see. But now we don't. So if I were a chair or a department personnel committee member, I would sit down with a faculty member maybe in front of the screen after it comes to the department level to be sure that everything is there, and mentor that person, be sure it's all just right, so that when it goes to the college level, right, you all as a department are being well represented with that file. The case for the faculty member is being made, and the department has also done its mentoring. Okay. I have my places that I start when I'm reviewing a file. If I'm reviewing a tenure track faculty member or somebody up for tenure, the first place I go is the last page of their hiring contract, which I think, third page? Still the third page. And sometimes people think that only the first page matters. They upload the contract, they only upload the first page. Actually, the last page of the contract is the most important thing. Why? It is the only place that officially says when somebody's mandatory year for tenure is, right? What their probationary period is. Why is this? I start there because that's the only way I know what standards they're being held to. I don't have a context for evaluating the file if I don't know what is their mandatory year and also what's their probationary year. The advice, the things that I say in a letter are going to vary depending on whether that person has a 4-year probationary period or a 6-year probationary period if they're being reviewed in their second year. So that information that's where I start, is with that, to know that information. If somebody's up for early tenure, they are held to different standards than if they're up in their mandatory year. So that's where to start. Okay, this is extremely important, and very few people are doing this. So in Article 22.7, right, if you look in that article of the contract, there is very specific language for recommendations. It's a word or a phrase, and you should use, when you're making a recommendation for a faculty member, you should use the language of the contract, because people make up their own language and it isn't always exactly clear what they mean. So for chairs and DPCs, it's important to use the language of the contract. When I write a letter, I set out all the basic information to do with the personnel action at the very beginning of the letter. I want the person reading the letter to know right away, what are the facts? Is the person up for early tenure, mandatory tenure? Where are they in the probationary period? How long is their probationary period? Is it the second year of review, the fourth year? So I set out just all the basic facts of the, to do with their personnel action. If they're going up for full, the basic information is their years in rank, because that determines their eligibility. So just all of that basic information ought to go right in the very beginning. This is important, making clear in letters of faculty members' assignment, especially in the arts, where it can be very complicated. Sometimes faculty members have split appointments, and again, I think it's important to know what people are assigned to do in scholarship and creative work and teaching when you're evaluating them. One of the reasons to read the CBA is because when you write these letters, you have to make recommendations about merit. And that means you're recommending the salary that people should get, the percentage of increase in the raise. It's important to know how this system works so that in your recommendation, you're doing what you actually mean to be doing. I think there's been some cases maybe where that wasn't the case. You have to know what people can get merit for and how much and all of that. That's your responsibility if you're writing letters and judging a case to do with merit. If you continue someone with reservations, make clear the area or areas of concern. That's very helpful. Okay, our document, our college document, makes very clear that when we are talking about service, we don't just want a list of activities. We can get that from a CV, we can get that from Faculty 180. I would say that most of the letters that we're getting from chairs and personnel committees is simply a list. This person did this activity, that activity, this activity, that activity. That is not very helpful. As somebody said here, we've all been on committees where somebody's on the committee and they've never shown up. So what matters about service? Our own college document says, talk about the difference a faculty member makes with their service. So if somebody's your graduate coordinator, don't just say that they're graduate coordinator. What have they done? What difference have they made as the graduate coordinator? Say something about the quality and the impact of their service, and faculty should do the same in writing their statements. Ideally, we want department personnel committees to come to a consensus about a recommendation. I mean, in the ideal world, we want every level of review to be the same recommendation. That's what we always like to see. It's not always the case, and it's not always possible for a department personnel committee to come to consensus about a recommendation. If you can't, if you're a department personnel committee member and you can't come to consensus, what I always advise people to do was write one letter signed by all committee members, but make all views known. That means that we don't know whose view is what, and we don't need to know that, but we do need to know the different views. We have done that we've done that a few times at the college level. I don't know if departments have done that or not. Okay, now to the faculty tips. I think we've talked about the importance of understanding standards. Be sure to know what your department and the college require for documentation. I'm going to talk a little bit about this, but people have already talked about it. We have common college requirements, but departments differ with respect to what they require. In the area of teaching, for example, some departments require student work, others don't. So know what both the college and your department requires. I think the biggest issue we've had in documentation is it's just not there. I mean, there's nothing there. It's like in the whole area of scholarship and the whole area of service, there's not a single link that's hot linked. It would be in the old days like turning in a binder without anything behind the service tab or the scholarship tab. That's never been acceptable. It's not acceptable now. What has changed is because of Faculty 180, we can see in an instant what's missing. It was harder to see that with the binder. Now it's very easy to see the lack of documentation. When you're documenting your scholarship, think of it this way. You have to document that the activity you're claiming actually happened in the place where you say it happened. So it's fine to upload, say, a conference paper, and some departments want to see the conference paper. Some don't, but that's fine to upload that. But a conference paper that you've written doesn't document that you gave it at the AHA or whatever conference on October 18th. It doesn't document anything. It just, you wrote the paper. But the point is, you're getting credit for presenting it at a conference. And so you've got to provide the documentation that shows that. In the case of a conference presentation, it would be the conference program right, with your name in it. This is obvious, but again, everybody needs to, the chairs and personnel committees need to help the faculty realize whether all of their documentation, all their materials are there or not. Okay, I said this, everything in Faculty 180 should be hot linked, right? All of your entries should be hot linked with something. You know, even if it's I would say, just to be safe, I mean, even if it's department service, let's say that your chair is written about something you've done in your department, just upload something there that says see department letter. Or in the history department, Rock sends out committee assignments at the beginning of the year. We have a document that has all our committee assignments. You could just put something like that up to show. But everything that's there ought to be hot linked. Name files in a logical, consistent way so reviewers know at a glance what they contain. Imagine if you're on the college committee, I don't know how many files we looked at this year, but it's lots. It's a lot of time. And so you want to think about how can I make my case as strong as I can, but also how can I make my materials as easy to navigate as possible and as transparent. If you do, when you do, I should say, upload things like conference programs, highlight your name in there so we don't have to sit there and read through all this program, try to find where you are in it. One of the committee members, this is kind of a composite of comments from the committee. Somebody pointed out that let's say you're in an art exhibition, for just as an example, and it's 3 years before you're going up for review. And the exhibition has a website, and so there's a link. Don't assume that that link will still be current 3 years when you go later when you go up for review, or that website, that exhibition website will even be there. Take a screenshot of what's relevant to you and keep that for your file. We've already talked about this. Again, you know, sometimes journals don't necessarily have the journal name on the page. So just if you're uploading a publication or if you're documenting something with a publication, be sure that you include all the information, again, that shows it's that particular publication, the page, table of contents, ISBN page, if it's a book. Be sure evidence for Category A work indicates the method of peer review. It's not always obvious that something's, I mean, if it's a professional journal article, that's obvious, but especially in the arts and other things, it's not always obvious how things are reviewed. And so that's important. We've already said about using ongoing so that, let's say your letters from prior review, if you don't have ongoing, they won't necessarily show up. If they're dated before this deadline date for your review. Your statement, yes, I think Mark mentioned you should of course talk about how you meet the expectations at your accomplishments, but also goals, areas for improvement. I mean, if you've had issues in your SEOIs, don't deny it, don't ignore it, talk about it, address it. If you're going up for tenure, you know, the university is making a lifetime investment in you by tenuring you. So talk about, we want to be sure you're not going to just die as a teacher and a scholar and a creative person. So talk about not just what you've done and how you've met expectations, but also what are some of your future goals. Make the point that you have a future agenda and goals for research and teaching. Your statement should be consistent with what you have in Faculty 180. We saw cases where people would write a statement and say they had this many Category A items, 3 or 4, and then there were 10 things in Faculty 180. Things just don't match, and so be sure that there's consistency. Your role in any collaborative scholarship needs to be made clear. I think the best way to do that the best way to do that is have somebody other than you do it, but don't not do it. We need to know what is your role in collaborative work. Book contracts are conditional documents. Some result in books and some do not. Many book contracts never result in a book. So we, in our college, have not accepted book contracts as completed Category A items, right? They show that a press has faith in you, and if you meet the expectations for scholarship or exceed them without the book contract enhances your case. But by itself, it's got a bunch of conditional language and contingencies. What will happen if you don't do the manuscript? What will happen if the press doesn't accept your manuscript? I was given a book contract before I did any research, let alone write the manuscript. If I had never done the book, there's nothing that says I had to do the book. So a book contract by itself is a conditional document, and we need an unconditional document in order to count it as completed. And in department documents, there's some kind of phrasing about a letter from the press guaranteeing publication. That's the only way. Otherwise, we could tenure somebody with a book contract, the book is never produced, or the press doesn't accept the book, and that we've tenured somebody on zero scholarship if that's their only thing. So that's why we do that. We can never count an item of scholarship twice. So this is very important to think about. If you have an item of scholarship that's not complete, not completed, even if you have that letter from the press that says your book is going to be published and everything, when do you count this? Think carefully about that, right? Because if you count it, for example, for tenure, you can't count it for your next promotion. So you want to sort of think carefully about when you count things. And this is why when I am reviewing somebody who's going up for full professor, the first place I go is not their contract. The first place I go is the previous promotion letters. That's the only thing that will tell me what was counted in their previous promotion. That's the only way I know what I can count in this second promotion. And I think this is my last thing. Finally, we've had issues with SCOIs. Nobody's going to get upset if you're missing a few SCOIs, and if you have less than 5 students in a class, you don't have to have SCOIs, and you could indicate that the class didn't have the enrollment for SCOIs. But missing whole quarters and years, half the years of the period of review, there's just no excuse for this. We can get our SCOIs from the testing services, and that level of missing of SCOIs is, I would say, problematic. I think that's it. I guess, it should be all of our job. In the department, we want to see faculty succeed in this process. So that's why we're doing this training. So we want to see you, if you're up for review, make your best case. We want to see your department help you make your best case. But we also, I think, would appreciate it if you try to make your materials as transparent and as easy to access as possible.